The Steel Plaza podcast right back here coming at you live in the new era. And it's time to vote again. It's time to vote for a new mayor. Well, we have great news because this time Bill Peduto is not running unopposed. And as a matter of fact, one of his opponents is with us on the show today, Mike Thompson. Mike Thompson, say hello to the crowd.
Hey, I'm Mike Thompson.
Mike Thompson for mayor, and his catchphrase is change happens now. You can go to his website at mikethompsonformayor.com. Thompson spelled the British way, T-H-O, and you can take a look at all of his grassroots campaign efforts that are going on for him. And Mayor Elect Thompson, if we could ask, what are some of the things that you want to change that Bill Peduto is not doing?
First of all, police reform. A lot of people this summer expressed their First Amendment rights, and they weren't treated as people. They weren't treated as human beings. That means we need a fundamentally new police department. We're going to make that happen. So, first of all, you cut the police budget by 50%, and then you bring in other resources to address needs. If someone calls in and they're in crisis and they need mental health help, you send a social worker. If someone calls in and their neighbor is too loud, you send a conflict negotiator, a social worker, anyone other than a police officer. You don't need to send someone with a gun to solve simple incidences. Okay?
Right.
We're going to be a safe city, a clean city, but you need to have fundamental change. And so one of the things you can do is the East Pittsburgh plan. If you go to East Pittsburgh right now, they had a problem with their police department. And then one day, no more police department. Gone. East Pittsburgh's patrolled by the state police, and we can make that happen right here in Pittsburgh. The police are controlled by the people, and we have to reinforce that. We can make that happen right here in Pittsburgh. That's our first step.
You know what? I agree with that because how many times has, I don't know, a neighbor called because there's garbage in their lawn, and now here's a guy showing up, trigger discipline, hand on the trigger, to the neighbor's house about a piece of garbage in the lawn. What is the need for that?
Right, it's just excessive. It's unwarranted. Also, police officers didn't train for that. They train for real policing. They want to go after burglars. They want to go after armed robbers, people with guns. We want the policemen to be better policemen. They're not trained to be social workers. And so if you need a social worker or you need a community advisor, send that person. Don't send a policeman. His options are what? To pull out his gun or arrest you? These aren't the correct responses to a lot of situations. Those are the tools in his belt. So you need to send someone with different tools in their arsenal to address a lot of these situations.
Yeah, you don't want to send the guy, that's been up all night on the midnight to 6 a.m. shift, and all he wants to do is crack open a beer when he gets home. And guess what? Now he's getting called to a neighbor's house because of some dumb shit going on in the area. The guy's already out of his mind because he's sleep deprived, and now he's got the trigger discipline. He's got his hand on his hip. He's showing up at a place that he's pissed off already. Do we need that?
No, you don't. Well, he's trained to do what he's trained to do, which is to assess threats. But often, he's called in situations where there is no threat. There's a community complaint. You need some community outreach. You need discipline in a setting where you talk to neighbors. You have to remember this is Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Often you still want to send Mr. Rogers, not the policeman. You're like, hello, I'm your neighbor. Perhaps we have a problem. We need to hire Mr. Rogers type people to address most of these situations. And the policemen are going to like their job better. Because when they're called, they're going to get to address actual policing issues. People don't become policemen so they can handle litter complaints and noise complaints. Real policing. And talk to the policemen. They don't want to be social workers. And we're going to help them not be social workers. It's 100% going to be better for all the people. And the social workers, they've trained to be social workers. And they get to be social workers. Everyone's going to be happy, and the city's going to be better.
Right, and there's a huge populace that doesn't really understand what social workers do because they're so not attached to that sort of lifestyle. So let's try to explain what a social worker's job is.
Oh, it's pretty broad. So a social worker assesses a person's need, or if they're working one-on-one, if they're working in the community, they assess the community's need. They're very good at communicating. When you're meeting one-on-one with them, they go over all of your problems. They help you kind of identify and correctly think through what are the problems, how do I get here, what are my step forwards. A lot of it's something, critical thinking. What's the root problem of the issue? What are our feelings? Are we just feeling upset or angry or some sort of emotion, or is this actually a problem? They help separate your emotions and feelings from the actual issues and problems of the day, which is a big part of how you address people in crises, and they help you resolve those. And in a community setting, like my local neighborhood group, the South Oakland Neighborhood Group, was set up by a social worker from the Oakland Planning and Development Corporation. This is someone who reached out to the community, set up a neighborhood group, and now there's a neighborhood association in the neighborhood. So this is someone who just took a one-on-one approach and took a broader focus on the community and figured out what the community's needs are, what the community needs to address, and how, as a community, we can come together better. And this is a great plan for Pittsburgh. Some neighborhoods have communities, and they're well-organized communities. Others need social workers to help organize. And then you have somewhere to go. You have a neighborhood association. You know your neighbors. And this is a great way to address conflicts before they even need to go to the next step. Because communication is essential, and we definitely need to do a better job communicating.
So the idea is not defund the police, but reroute resources.
Correct.
Reroute.
We're just right. So when you call 911, your complaint will be addressed. Someone will show up. The money will still go to help you, but it's going to help you more effectively. If the money should go to a social worker or mental health resources, that will go to that instead, and you will get better help. If you're in mental crisis, you don't need a police officer there. You need someone who can provide you the resources you need to help you.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm having a mental crisis and I'm calling 911, I don't want a guy showing up that already has a mental crisis, because now you got two guys there having a mental crisis.
It's a showdown, and the person with more authority is the police officer. You're going to lose. And going to jail is not a good way to get mental health assistance. Police officer thinks he's done his job well. The problem is, he did his job the way he was trained, but he shouldn't have been called there in the first place. If the social worker needs backup, the social worker can call the police. But if you approach the situation calmly as a professional, and you're trained to defuse situations, you're trained to approach people, you're trained to reach out to people in crises, as social workers are, as mental health professionals are, then most of these situations can be resolved without having to resort to any sorts of arrests or time in jail. Often, mental health situations can only be, made worse by time in prison. This isn't the approach you want to people who are having perhaps the worst day in their life. And we make it worse when we send an armed police officer instead of someone who's here to help.
How I can count just right on my hand how many times there's been a police officer behind me in traffic, and I got very anxious. My anxiety went through the roof, and I shouldn't feel that way. I should feel safe when there's a police officer nearby, not anxious, right?
Right. And so ideally, if your situation in the community relationship with the police is such that you know that when they're there and they come to address you, that they're there to protect you and to serve you, in that situation, the police officer will reassure you with their presence. And, time and again, I feel the same way. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Did I run a red light? Am I speeding? Even if I'm doing everything correctly, sometimes I worry. And this is something we need to address. We need to address my relationship, your relationship, the community relationship with the police. That starts with the new police department. If you have new police and you train the police in a way that they reach out to the community, they're from the community, they're part of the community is assured that when they're called, they're there to serve and protect, then that creates a new baseline. So when you see the policeman, you know he's there to protect you. He's there to make sure that there's no armed robberies, no burglaries. Right. Everyone's being safe. And if he sees you in crisis, he'll call someone to help you. And if that person's not him, he'll find an appropriate resource.
Right.
They need to be something like, people who guide you towards help. They don't have all the tools in their toolkit. And part of being human is being humble. You have to acknowledge that we don't have all the things we need. We have to say, I can't handle this, or I need help, and to reach out. And ideally, police officers will do that. They'll say, this is a person who needs this kind of help. I'm going to call so-and-so. They don't have to have the answer to every problem. And they don't have the answer to every problem. And part of good police is acknowledging that.
Right, exactly. And like you said, we shouldn't have that built-in anxiety that it triggers off. As soon as you see a police officer, now your anxiety's through the roof. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be like, this is a guy that does a job. He's here to help me, not fuck up my whole day.
Right. And you just have to reassert that primary goal. And the police officer becomes a police officer because he wants you to feel safe when he's around. He wants you to see him and say, that's a police officer. He's here to keep me safe. Thank you. The police officer's goal is not to scare you. And if it is, then you want a new police officer. But in the heart of ours, police officers want to keep you safe. We want fewer burglaries. We want fewer murders. We want less crime in the streets. And there's 100% a way to make that happen. And so I don't like to use some of the semantics other people use. We're just going to make the police better police, and we're going to have social workers be better social workers, and our whole community, our whole city, our whole neighborhood will benefit. But it starts with changing the way you think about our community, changing the way you think of our society, changing the way you think of Pittsburgh. And I'm 38, and Bill Peduto, he's done. His time is done. They're called the
Yeah, his time is done. Yeah, he's, you know what, and both sides of the aisle are seeing it. They're seeing he's a fraud. They're seeing he's a phony. Democrat, Republican alike. They're seeing he's a puppet and he's garbage, and he's running out of close-up magic tricks.
Well, it's not just him. This happens to all people. George Washington had 8 years. Barack Obama had 8 years. Our current governor, 8 years. 8 years is enough. If you're in an executive position, after 8 years, you need to step aside, okay? You need to step aside, and you need to stop tweeting. You can't hold on to power forever and tweet forever like our ex-president who's gone. This is a sign of bad leadership. You need to, A, get things done, B, stop tweeting. But there's no reason why you have more than 8 years. I challenge you to find one mayor who has had a great third term of office. Okay? Bernie Sanders, 8 years as mayor. 8 years is enough. And most cities have a law that requires 8 years. I will be your mayor for 8 years. On the 9th year, it'll be illegal for me to be mayor because we're going to have a law making a maximum term of 8 years. Very simple. Peduto had a few good ideas in his first 2 years, and good enough. Done. It's time for him to move on. Now, we call them Democrats in name only, dinosaurs. We're friendly towards them. They were good Democrats back in their day. What you do with your dinosaurs, you put them out in the museum. We treat them kindly. We treat them nicely. We visit them in the museum. We have a great collection of dinosaurs. It's just time for you to move on. There are young people in this city. We're a city of the future. We have to act like it.
Well, we really do. And Peduto's term is a little bit long in the tooth. Everybody's starting to notice. Both sides of the aisle. They're disgusted with his dog and pony show, his bread and circus, and it's time for him to go. And that's why, as a Pittsburgher, I am so glad that somebody is running against him so he cannot run unopposed any longer. And we'll be right back after the break with Mayoral Elect Mike Thompson. Right back after this on the show. Right back here on the Steel Plaza podcast on the Steel Plaza Network. If you like what you hear, you can always donate to the show at www.paypal.me/Steel Plaza Podcast. And we're chatting with Mayoral Elect Mike Thompson, running against Bill Peduto, who is America's sweetheart when it comes to social media. And I know that you saw one of his tweets that really stuck out to you. Which one was that?
So he compared all of the left-wing protesters to Nazis. And he was called out by all the local Jewish organizations. And you can't just call them all Nazis. There's a famous poem. First they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist. I didn't say anything. Then they came for the Jews, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't Jewish. Well, as a socialist and as a Jew, I'm quite concerned. When's he coming for me? You can't just, these names about, okay? I am happily Jewish, and I'm not going to just throw the word Nazi around every time I have a disagreement with one of my political opponents. The left-wing people who protested this summer are people, they're human beings, they need to be treated as such, and you have to listen. Part of your job as mayor is to stop tweeting and to start listening. And he seems to have forgotten that. You can't be in love with the sound of your own voice. You have to do more than just play mayor. You have to also be mayor. And if it's not fun, well, tough. It's called being mayor. The job is not going to be fun. And if it's not hard work, you shouldn't be mayor.
Now, I'll just give you an example. We'll just kick into it real quick. Bill Peduto posted the following. Pittsburgh approves ADL resolution condemning domestic terrorism. All right.